the 30th, and I'm interviewing Dave Appotive at his office. I'm Joe Murray, and Dave, you were just going to ask something. One-hour tape, 3-hour tape, 10-hour tape, as much as you want.
As much as I want. Okay.
As much as you want.
So let's go ahead.
All right. The one question that I use very frequently, and it works well, why did the Appotives come to Ottawa?
That's a good question, Joe. The Appotives came to Ottawa because my mother was the last of her family who wanted to leave Russia because of the pogroms that was taking place. A lot of the family on my father's part were killed, and although they were in the lumber business, that's December Russia.
Okay.
December Russia. That was in 1925 we left. And the reason we picked Ottawa was because my mother's mother, Gittel Weiner, was here with her 3 sons and 3 daughters. The oldest son, Moshe Weiner, had moved to California. All the rest settled in Ottawa. And Baba Gittel lived with her younger daughter, Anne Weiner, and her second oldest son was Itzik Weiner, and he was married to Clara Weiner. They had a family as well. And then there was Harry Weiner, married to his wife Edith, and there was Malka Siegel and Tybert Chern here as well. So it was only naturally that my mother would gravitate to Ottawa rather than any place else.
With the family?
With the family. My father, mother, and 4 sons all moved here. Now Rudy, my oldest brother, was 10 at the time. I was 8. My brother Joe was 6, and the little one, Ben, was about 3.5 years of age. We moved in to Ottawa with my grandmother. That was 2 people there. We were 6. That made it 8 in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment at 83 Clarence Street. That building was owned by Levinson Pollowitz, the real estate people at the time. And the area was good because we were surrounded by Jewish families. In the same building where we were, and it was only a 4-unit building. There was the Kevinsteins that lived there. Beside the Kevinsteins, on the same side of the street of Clarence Street, there was Balin, the tinsmith. There was Bar the butcher. There was M. Kusky, the furniture people. There was Oster family. There was Silverman, the jeweler. And if you remember, Nathan Lang was the barber at the time. Plus the Hansers were who were there.
Wasn't Dworkin the deli there too? Or that after?
At one time there was a Dworkin later on. And Dworkin was the bar took over, the butcher shop. And there was Slover across the street from us through the back entrance. But the most important of all was the drugstore. He was a friend of all the Jews and looked after the discounted and everything else. So that was the area. And then, of course, there was Olive William Street. And that was surrounded by Jewish families. There was Shrew Wiener. There was Nathanson. He had a music store. Rudenberg had a clothing store. The Steinbergs had furniture. His furniture. There was Isaac Wiener, the pawnbroker in those days. Who else can I tell you? And, of course, across the street was the market where Zelikovich's,
the fruit dealers.
Zelikovich's, the Rapoport, Pleats, their fruit, our fruit supply was on Nicholas Street somewhere. And then the retail stores, there was Sunders, and Rivers, and Eisenberg's, Jack Ballard was there, and
Cooper Smith,
and the Kimmels and the Litwicks and the Crowes and the Schulmans. So it was a very Hamish area to move to. And then, of course, there was the market with all the Jewish stands. Well, I know my mother's older brother, Ziesel, he was married to Federliner. He had a stand down there, and I think everybody else in the Jewish community had some type of stand on the market to make ends meet. And what else can I tell you about that area? A block from that area, or 2 blocks from the area, we were surrounded by Murray Street, York Street, St. Patrick Street, and we're where the Jewish population of Ottawa lived at the time. And of course, the champagne baths of all places that were there, where the boys went into a little bit of swimming and more funnery than anything else. There was York Street School, of course, where we all went, and because my brother, myself, and my older brother, and my youngest one, Joe, or the second youngest, went to York Street School, and there wasn't a week that went by where one of us didn't come home with a bleeding nose or bleeding lips or a black eye, because the language barrier, we couldn't communicate until quite a bit later. We were young, 10 years, 8 years going to kindergarten. Can you imagine? And no language to understand. Now, as I said, we came from Zitomar over here, and although my father was more or less of a playboy there, because in Russia, Zitomar, the family had lumber yards and they were quite well off. And over here, he was given a horse and wagon, and it was rented by somebody on York Street that was renting horses and this and that. I forget it. Soper, if I'm not mistaken, his name was.
He had the livery stable.
He had a livery stable. He was renting out the horses by the day. So my father was given a horse and a wagon and go and sell fruit and vegetables, even though you can't talk English. Again, there was camaraderie among the people that he was associating with, and somehow or other we made ends meet. Although people that had little wagons that you usually use for play, we used it, Rudy and I used it to go and sell strawberries and baskets of fruit in the summertime so that we could have bread and milk on the table instead of bread and water on the table. But it's hard to explain that to youngsters today how things were when we first started. Cater, of course, was a highlight. We had Rabbi Lifshitz, Kranzberg, Szyminski. Each one of them had a nice thick ruler, and their pleasure was to give them all your hands or your tus, whichever way you wanted to. But they made you learn, and you did learn how to daven, how to explain yourself, and everything that goes with it.
Back to York Street School, can you remember some of the teachers?
I remember one that was tough as hell. His name was Armstrong. It's gone back some 75 years. I really don't recall too many, but he's always was in my mind.
Yeah.
He was tough, but he was fair. That's what it is. He was fair.
And you had woodwork shop and.
Of course, we had woodwork shop. We had gymnasium. We had in the yard there was tennis courts on cement floors. I want you to know, and baseball, basketball. It was all there. There was no lack of anything else. The good part of it is York Street School is still there even 75 years later, and I understand it's been refurbished a few times since my days.
Did you know that when it was built, it won medals? It was the most up-to-date school, like construction-wise.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how many years prior to us coming to Canada or to Ottawa that it was built, because we came here in 25 and it was up and running.
Yeah.
So I really don't know how much. How long before that?
Can you recall the school during Jewish holidays? Like they say, it was like a morgue and there was nobody there.
Well, the school, I'm sure the school was populated 30 to 40% by Jewish. Jews and Polacks were the main people there.
Yeah.
At the time. What else was there?
You were too young to remember the trip itself.
Yeah, no, I wasn't too young at the time because we kept talking about it for God knows how many years and events. It took our family about a year to go from our home in September to get to the boat because the programs were on horribly bad, and people were, because of the family name, a lot of the villagers were hiding us for a number of days at a time because of what was taking place, and because of that, by the time we really got into it, there was about a year lapse between getting the ship landed in St. John's, Quebec, and from what I understand, they asked you information, but no matter what they asked you, didn't understand anyway, so they spelled the name anywhere they wanted. We were in Israel, and some of our relatives there spelled the Apatov, A-P-A-T-O-V, and that one spells A-P-O-T-O-V. It's the same as the Wieners, although the Wieners, Shul and Isaac, was really Weiner, but immigration spelled the name differently. So that's how there's a separation.
Well, that was the same thing, but Liebman Kardish and
that's right, Liebman Kardish.
C and a K.
And a K, that's right. That's because whatever they had at the border, that's what you became here.
Now, the neighborhood, how did you get along with the non-Jewish people?
Well, in our neighborhood, really, truly, we were restricted. We really had, I would say, 99% Jewish area.
Yeah.
If you would go down Clarence Street, go down to St. Patrick Street, right near the shul of Maziki Adas, although we called it Maziki Adas, but it seems that the ones that weren't greenhorns called it the Peddlers shul, because it was mostly, a lot of people were food peddlers and second-hand peddlers of metals and clothing on the streets. So it was known by that, but in that area, my goodness, there was the Slovers, there was the
Jack Morris. Yankele Morris.
Yankele Morris. By Anthony Siegel lived in that area. Batowski lived over there. Then it was Applebaum, the tinsmith that was too far away. And then in the following block, the next block to that, there was what? There was the police and the slacks and the prisoners and the Murrays and the
Finkelsteins.
And the Finkelsteins and the one that had a grocery store. What was their name? Paul was Slim.
Markovich.
Thank you very much for helping. So it was really.
Were you there when Dane had the store too?
Well, sure. I was there when Dane had the store there. Then when he moved to Reader Street, and when somebody had a store where Edelson had a store right on the corner of what York had.
Right near the school.
Right near the school, York and Freedom. Yeah. And then of course there's the Balin Iron Works over there, and the Balins and what was his name? I can't remember. Petr Zelikovic. He was a religious man. He lived in one of the doubles right between Nelson and Freedom. I forget his name. He was on my.
Shores were there.
The Shores were there. Sadinsky was on the right near the shul.
Right.
So it was a fair effect. You weren't afraid to walk there at night. Let's put it that way.
Interesting you say that, because nowadays I wouldn't walk in that area late at night, in the market then, on Dalhousie and those streets.
Well, look what happened to the marketplace today. It's all of a sudden it's like Yorkville and Toronto.
Yeah.
And Dalhousie Street. You go down there, my goodness, the restaurants, I'd be afraid to eat there because at one time it was full of cockroaches and rats and everything on this town. And now it got to be the hub spot of the city. But it was also sad to see stores like the Rock that closed, Slovers that closed out because A.J. Freeman sold, Kaplan sold out, Schaefer's and Joe Feller. So I think things started to change quite a while ago.
Who were some of the services that
Jews dealt with, like milkmen, bakers, and so on?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because it goes back to the Captain Nelson day when he was delivering milk to the house, and Moshe Trainach was delivering milk as well, and the baker, Joe somebody or rather, I can't think of his name, he had a little, afterwards he had a little store in Carnegie Avenue near Parkdale.
Shalevsky.
He was the baker, and there was Bodner, there was Mossing Bakery, there was the Rita Bakery, and you had, everything was delivered to your house, and there was Pedagorski, the shoe leather, he was in the leather business, and Jack Smith's father, the shoemaker. So really and truly, you had all your people and your occupations right in that area there. All I know is that my father was most unhappy when he came here, and the reason for that was back home, he was a playboy, really and truly. They also had, besides the lumber industry, they used to call them phaetons in Jewish, with two horses. Over here they would call it a carriage, and like the Queen's rides.
A coach.
A coach, and he especially loved to go with his horses to destinations that were 20, 30 miles, with passengers back and forth. He came to Canada, to Ottawa, didn't know the language, was told to go and peddle fruit and vegetables. After about 3 or 4 months, he said, "Sir, I'm going back home." And my mother said to him, "At room, he gets into it, you stay business as you go." So whatever it was, that's the way his life started out, but he required a family here. But thank God, things turned out well. And here we are today talking about it.
When your dad was peddling, did you ever club Tyrn?
That sure did. We did some yelling and we clubbed the deer. We had.
You better explain what that is.
Well, in those days you had the 12-quart baskets, and in the basket you had a few of each thing you carried in the wagon. And you would go knocking on the door. Lady say, "Lady, you want some fruit and vegetables?" And it was a little bit hard on you, but you get accustomed to it, and you picked your route. But the trouble is, everybody was in competition in the same area for the same people. Whoever came first and was lucky enough for people to come and answer the door usually got the bid. There was no such thing as I'm waiting for so-and-so. And what else can I tell you? That's the way life, when we go to tell the children, or we used to ask our parents for 5 cents to buy 2 ice creams for a nickel, they think we're insane. You give it. I think later on when we got a little bit more financially off, my father used to give us, I think it was 35 cents a week spending money. And he wanted to know where we spent it. And today, a Coke alone, you need 2 weeks pay or 3 weeks pay to buy a Coke. So that's the way life. But thank God for that.
Did you or your brothers have any other jobs, like delivery boys or anything along, selling newspapers, anything along that?
No, we didn't get into that field because we were help peddling. In the summertime, we were on the wagon with my father peddling fruit and vegetables. So after school, we peddled fruit and vegetables. Shabbos, for sure, we went. And that was getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes finishing, coming home from the flats. The flats is now the what do you call them now? Cape. Oh my goodness. The Breton, yeah, that was the Breton Flats. And that's where the really poor people were living, and you were, whatever you had left over, you sort of sold it for next to nothing. Well, as I was thinking, and as I was saying, there was my dad and Rudy, myself, Joe, and Ben were on the horse and wagon with my father, and we could cover a street 2 or 3 times as fast as most people because they were by themselves, whereas we were 4 or 5 people to take business or to make a living. But it was all a matter of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You were lucky if the stores were, some of the smaller stores were open to buy merchandise from, and continue working.
Yeah, and the pay must have been very, very good too.
What do you mean by good? If you call $1 a day good, that was good pay in those days.
Yeah.
In those days, it was good pay.
I remember Joe Bodnoff, you know, that one that died, the one that was in the Air Force.
Yes.
And my cousin, Joe Bratros,
Yes.
they worked for my dad one summer, and he gave them like the top salary. It was $1 a day, but they had to be in the market at 7 in the morning. And by the time they got home, it was 7 at night. That's a 12-hour day.
That's a 12-hour day. Well, you don't have to going back a little bit later on in life. I worked for, when I went from York, I went to the High School of Commerce. Now, we lived at that time at 224 Clarence Street.
Near Nelson.
No, King Edward.
Okay.
Between Cumberland and King Edward. My family finally gathered up about $700 or $800 in cash, and we were able to buy this double for the family. So we rented out one part of it. We lived in the other part of it. And what could I say? Rudy was going to school, and I was going to school, but when we started to go to commerce, we had one bicycle. But in those days, they didn't complain too much if one person sat on the seat and the other one on the handlebars or on the frame of it. And that's the way we got to school, and that's the way we came from school. But we had to leave about an hour before the school starts to get there in time. But it was good memories as well.
Okay, let's go on. No,
You tell these stories, and hopefully in the future people will be able to appreciate what the Jews in Ottawa, and this was a good community.
Very good.
A very good community. Imagine some of the poorer or the worse off sections in the world where Jews emigrated to. So anyway, lots of fun.
Right.
Now, the war affected everybody. There's no question.
Yes, the war did affect us because things didn't look good when you were reading the papers. On the other hand, you didn't want to be a conscript, because if you were a conscript in the army, it automatically meant that you went into the infantry. And the Jewish boys in the Monsons, myself, Kowski, a group of us decided that let's enlist and pick the unit we want to be in. That's when I discovered I was colorblind. I wanted to be a pilot, so I went to the Air Force, and I passed the educational procedure, no problem. And all of a sudden they start flashing lights on me. They gave me a book to read what got the numbers or color. I didn't know one color from another. Okay, you can be an Air Force pilot. You can be in the administration type of work. I didn't like doing that, so I went. There was a new outfit that opened up in British Columbia called One Canadian Workshop and Park with flamethrowers. And I enlisted in that with Carl Wasserman and Ben Batch, a Jewish boy from Toronto as well. And we were sent overseas in 42, and we were together throughout the war. Batcher went to another part of the Canadian workshop, but we all chummed around. And we were the only company that supplied bridging, whether it was the pontoon bridge or the English bridge, to the American Army, to the Canadian Army, and to the English Army as well. Now, although we were in our unit, there was about, I would say, 95 to 100 Canadians, we were in charge. Each section was at 24 to a section, and each section had 1,000 pioneers which is English labor force, working for you, that were responsible to assemble and take apart bridging of all types. We also did the mine sweeping before the army would cross over. We were very, very fortunate. We lost a lot of pioneer workers, the English people, but in our own section, our own 96 to 100 Canadian, I think we only lost about 4 people, and that was in the mine blow-up. We were lucky again in the army days because we were attached to an American section, so at least we were fed well. With the Canadians with stores and the English ones, they weren't that happy with. So we were lucky. We were with Dempsey's army, American general, for I would say a year and a half to 2 years.
How old were you at the time?
How old was I? 1945, 1917. I was about 1940, about 25.
You were married at the
I
time?
was married at the time.
Yeah. When did you get married?
I got married at about 41. In 2 more years, I'm going to have 60 years. That's when you said married. I got a good story to tell you. And the story was another family by the name of Peddlers, who came also from Zhytomyr in Russia about a year later than we did, and had no one to come to. Moved in with my Bobby and her daughter, us 6 Appotive. They were 5, so there was 5 and 6 of the 13 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom. Now they tell me that my younger brother Joe always picked on the older girl of the Peddlers by telling her she's a greenhorn. Go back, we don't want you here. They also tell me that I was a very bad boy because Edith, the youngest daughter, had long blonde hair, but she had pigtails, and I used to pull the pigtails until I made her cry. Who knows? But so maybe about 15 years later, I end up marrying the same little girl that I picked or pulled the pigtails. They had moved about being in Ottawa for about 5 years. They had moved to Montreal because Moishe Feldblum found a better job in Montreal than he was able to land over here. He did not like to go out with a horse and a wagon to make a living. So he got a job at Paperman's, the funeral people, in Montreal. So that's where they moved.
And your other brothers were married then too?
My Joe got married right after the war, and he married a girl by the name of Sheva Parnas. And sure enough, they became a shotgun for my older brother Rudy, who married Sheva's sister. So 2 brothers married 2 sisters about a year and a half apart. And thank God, things were good. I have 4 children. And 2 live in Ottawa, Sharon and Jeffrey. 2 live in Toronto, Gloria and Donna. I have 10 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. And we are a very close family. So are we close to my brother Rudy and his family, Stephen Appotive and Eric Appotive. They're both lawyers, by the way. And their daughter Enid, who is about the same age as my daughter Sharon, is living in Florida. She married a doctor, and they're living in Florida and enjoying life. Joe's 2 sons are both jewelers, Howard Jeweler and Howard Jewelers, as is well known in the city. And his daughter, Sheva, Debbie, married a young man from Montreal, and they're now living in the States. They're emigrated over there. And we're all doing well, comfortably out, enjoying the city and the population, and very active in the shul facilities. Can I tell you a story about the shul?
Just 1 second, before I forget. How did they become involved in the jewelry business?
When Howard was a youngster, I would say when he was 6 or 7 years, he says he's going to be in the diamond business. And believe it or not, he was so adamant about being in that business. Excuse me. The jeweler had a son, Howard's age, and they were both in the same class, and they became very, very good friends. And Howard used to visit the Burke home, and the Mr. Burke, so whoever owned the Burke's jewelry store, was so fascinated by this boy saying that he's going to be in the diamond business, the jewelry business, that he asked him to come in whenever he has spare time into the store and do odd jobs. And that's how he got started. He just fell in love with it. And that's when he said to Burke, I'm going to be in competition. So he left Burke, he went to Toronto to learn the trade, then he went to California to get his
degree,
whatever you needed in that. And he's been most successful ever since.
Yeah.
His younger brother, David, also wanted to be in the same field. So a few years after Howard got started, he joined Howard. And of course, now you know they've got shopping centers, jewelry business, restaurants are very, very large, very, very good, very charitable. And they're enjoying life, and so are the children. They've got children now that are 15, 20, 25 years of age.
Yeah.
The time goes by.
And now, which Appotive was a school teacher?
My daughter Sharon, the one that's downstairs right now in the office,
Yeah.
she was a school teacher, and she loved it until there was an influx of from the Middle East countries, and then discipline became a very, very big problem. The growth of the community was so big that the schools could not hold them, and they had these, what do you call them?
Portables.
Portables, and that just played havoc with them. In fact, she was there for 32 years, and from the reports we got, the notes from the children and the gifts that the children brought her on the occasion, and the parent focus were very complimentary to her as a school teacher, and she was a very, very good teacher. But something odd happened in March of this year. My son Jeffrey was going to South Africa on an insurance convention, and then decided that while he's there, he's also going to Greece for a week or two and to Israel. So he said to Sharon, he said, Sharon, why don't you retire? And Sharon says, will you take me with you on your trip? Am I allowed to go? He says, yes, you're allowed to go. So she retired in March, at the beginning of March, because the trip was the middle of March instead of the year end of school. And they had a beautiful time in Greece, and my oldest daughter, Joanna, joined them in Greece as well, and in Israel. So the three of them were on holidays. And then my youngest daughter, Donna, and her husband, Yaakov Feinstadt, and two of their children decided to go to Israel as well. So there was all the Appotives, except the father and the mother, were in Israel as well, all at the same time. I really enjoyed it. So that was with Sharon. Jeffrey joined me in the life insurance industry 25 years ago, and he's doing exceptionally well. The office is very busy. My Donna's husband, he's an importer of merchandise that Walmart, Zellers, that type of a store handles, and he's in China, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. I would say at least a week of every month of the year.
Oh.
And he took Donna with her on his last trip, and she said never in a million years would she want to live in that type of an atmosphere. But surprisingly, there was a lot of kosher restaurants and everything else that goes with it. And the rabbis of the shul, there's a lot of shuls there, when they see a stranger, always welcome them to the Shabbos dinner at their home.
Yeah.
So that was working good. What,
you were going to say something, and then I interrupted you. Okay, when you came back,
we came back for 45. mid-45. My wife had a health problem. I went to work for the S&S Auto Parts, where I worked pre the war, and the agreement of coming back did not work out at all. So I decided to go out on the road myself selling auto parts because I knew the business. And it lasted for about a year and a half. Then I decided that that's not for me. Traveling 5 days a week, being away from home was not what I wanted to be after being away so long. And my old but Gloria said to me, "Daddy, you don't like us because you take Mr. Bornstein, who lived right across from us, that's Reverend Bornstein. They were friends with their oldest daughter. They're home all the time and you're away." So that's when I decided it's time to change. My two oldest brothers had a what they call a small IGA store on the corner of Somerset and Russell in Sandy Hill, and it was too heavy a load for two of them to carry, although they had a butcher and other help. So I bought the restaurant light lunch part from them, and I worked it for 17 years. Worked it day and night, like from 7 o'clock in the morning till 11, 12 o'clock at night. And financially, it was a good stand, but it was very, very difficult because you had no time for family or anything else. And the kids were growing up and they were going to Lisgar school. And again, the subject of not attending teachers' meetings or seeing how the children progressed was on my mind. So I decided that it was time to get out of that field, and I was president of Mazikia Das, which was known really as the Peddlers show, because every peddler in the city of Ottawa, whether he was peddling fruit and vegetables or peddling used clothes or metalworks, was a member of that shul, and it was a very Freilicher shul. Freilicher means lively, and we joined that. Edith and I joined it. In fact, everybody, the Appotive family, was a member of that shul. And things were going okay, but one rabbi serviced Mazikia Das, which is our shul, Reader Street Shul, King Edward Street Shul, and even James Street Shul. And that was not to our liking because we got maybe 2 or 3 days, never on a high holiday, of the rabbi services. Saul Sasler was very active in the shul, and president for many, many years. He recruited me and a few more young men to serve on the board and to see if we could sort of liven up the shul, because the people were elderly and it was working on an $8,000 budget, and the reason the budget was so small, the old timers, the Pleats and the Slacks and the Kirchners and the Kevin Steens and maybe even the Murrays, I'm not sure, they had what they call permanent seats.
No, we didn't have it in Mizrach.
You didn't have, so I'll take you out of that talk. There was about 10 families or 15 families in the shul that had permanent seats, which means that when the shul was being built, they were approached for capital. And they each contributed $500 to help build the new shul, and for that they received lifetime membership, so they didn't have to pay for the seat, and they didn't have to pay for anything. Well, it wasn't working out, but they were adamant they wouldn't give up their seat, and all of a sudden Saul comes down to my store where I was still on Somerset Lunch. And he says, I want you to be the new president of the shul. Well, when a Saul says something, or said something, usually it had to be done. I said, Saul, you're Mashiach. She's my expression. But I said, where do I come? He says, you're good, you'll come, and you'll do a good job. And I'll be there to help you. So, and then Reuben Dabrowski was there at the time, too. He had a car lot on Reader Street. And sure enough, in 1962, I became the president of Mazikia Das, or Murray Street Shul, or the Peddlers Shul, call it what you may. but it still meant that we had a problem on our hands. We had a budget that had to be increased. How do you go about doing it? Anyway, after conversing with Herschel Fleet and Reverend Weisbord was there at the time, and Reverend Bornstein was at the time, we decided that we're going to try and take away this permanent seat idea, and instead of charging the regular membership and fees for the year, we would make them give them the distinction by lowering their fees by $1. So at least our budget, there was 2-3 meetings, and there was banging on the tables and no way, but they did see that there was really no other solution, and it worked out that everybody gave up their rights to their seats, and they had the seats, but they just had to pay $1 less than the normal person would pay. The show was a very lively show. We had downstairs, we had you might call it a social hall, but not in today's standard, of course. Well, we had weddings there, we had bar mitzvahs there, and there was a couple kosher caterers in those days. It was ladies. There was a Mrs. Goldfield, if my memory serves me right. In fact, she catered my wedding in that show, which was July the 26th. And there was no refrigeration of any kind. It happened to be about a 90-degree heat, and half the people were sick from the chicken and this and that. And then there was, of course, a Mrs. Klug. Her chunt was the best chunt ever made, and the kiddishes were magnificent because the kegels and the chunt, and the liquor was flowing freely. And believe me, in those days, a quart of liquor didn't last too long because the Kirchners, the Slacks, the Pleats, the Harrises.
2 fingers.
They didn't take an ounce. They took an ounce from the top of the glass. So, but it was lively, and the people were really more conscious of their obligations. After we decided that it's time to look for our own rabbi, can you imagine with the budget at that time finally got to $15,000. We hired our own rabbi, a young man by the name of Rabbi Weber. Now he also was married at the time, and we rented an apartment for him on Charlotte Street. We paid the apartment, and it was going good until by the second year he decided to go back to the yeshiva and asked to be released of his contract. Well, we asked him to stay on until we got until we went looking for a rabbi. We had our eye on Rabbi Reuben, who was the rabbi in the Catskills, and the problem was he had 5 children at the time. So the apartment that we had rented for Rabbi Weber was certainly not going to be suited for Rabbi Reuben. Anyway, Rabbi Reuben came in a few weekends. Because my family always went to the summer cottage in the Laurentians, my house was empty for about 2 months of the time, and they were staying at my place. A rabbi and Mrs. Reuben stayed at my place, but they ate at Herschel's Fleet's house because, after all, although I considered this a kosher place, he felt that maybe it would be better. So we let him. We stayed at Herschel's Fleet place, and we came down 2 or 3 weekends, and we weren't lucky to find a home. They were too expensive. I had a maximum of $20,000 to buy a home. Now, even in those days, $20,000 was pretty hard to find a good home for 7 people. As luck would have it, Harry Schinder was a real estate agent. So sure enough, Harry comes into my place in the restaurant. So David, he said, I have a house for you just for the rabbi. It's good. I said, Harry, where is it? It's on Marlborough Street, Mr. Schaefer's house. Mr. Schaefer? Yeah, he says he finds it hard to go the stairs. he and his wife want to buy a condominium or have bought a condominium on Strathcona Street in Sandy Hill, and he will leave a lot of his furniture there because it can't fit the condominium, and he even will give you $1,000 contribution for the down payment of the house, and he wants $25,000, and he will give you the first $1,000 on it, and he will take back a mortgage if you need it. So I told Harry, I said, buy it, but I got to get permission from the board. So we had a board meeting, and they were adamant that $20,000 and nothing else would budge. I said, okay, I got you $20,000. I'll raise the $5,000 among some friends and people I know. I lived at the time on High Ridge Avenue, which is on the corner of Crestview and High Ridge in Alta Vista. Had a large recreation area downstairs. So myself, Chief Greenberg, who now unfortunately has been gone for a long, long time, and a few more people hosted it, and sure enough, we picked up about $7,000 in pledges. I was pleased as heck. Now we got our money to buy the house, clean it up a little bit for the rabbi, and we paid cash for it. Although we had to go to the Bank of Commerce at the time, which is located on Reeder Street in Sussex, if I'm not mistaken, to make a loan there, but we did, and that's what happened. So Rabbi, but he had to walk from Marlborough to Murray Street, like every Shabbos, every Yom Tov, which of course he did, and that went on for quite a while. It turned out to be a very, very good move, but in the meantime, because Rabbi Rubin's salary was quite substantial at those days for our $15,000 budget, and James Street had problems as well. So between James Street and Cale and he had a shoe store on Bank Street. I can't recall his first name. He was the president of the shoe. So he and I got together on a number of occasions to see if we could amalgamate James Street shoe assets and Mazikia Das assets to see if we can stay in Mazikia Das for the time and buy a piece of land in Alta Vista, because that's where the influx of the Jewish families were moving to. Well, after about 5 or 6 meetings, heated meetings, I might say, the decision was that James Street Shul was going to join Beth Shalom and turn over all its assets to them. So we were left alone, but still we managed to balance the budget. And also at that particular time, Reeder Street and the community center was starting to grow on Chapel and Reeder Street. Reeder Street and James Street and Reeder Street and King Edward Street decided to amalgamate, and they went into the shul, or they built a shul in the community center on Reeder and Chapel to make one big shul which took place. King Edward Street then became the Chevek Edition place for the Jewish people in the city of Ottawa. Reeder Street was sold for whatever assets there was, and it then became that Reeder Street, Rabbi Eckstein, who came to Ottawa for many years, was the rabbi for there. We had our own rabbi, and it was working good. The understanding was that one of the two, Agudat Israel, which was also being built in the late 60s, I would say. They had their own rabbi, which was sort of conservative in a way. So the agreement between the Bet Shalom and Mazikia Das and with the Vod was that one Orthodox rabbi would have to be in the city of Ottawa, while the other one was away, should the other one take any holidays. And that was worked very well for a long time. From going back to Shul, I must say that we had some very, very strong workers at Mazikia. There was the Mr. Nadalny, Max Nadal. Now, if you ever saw a stubborn man in your life, that was him. But if you ever wanted to have something done, that was him as well. He put his hand on the table and said, "Azay dafazan," and azay it had to be. But one thing for sure, he was very, very, very good at raising money. He was well liked if you overlooked his stubbornness. He sort of made the young men feel good, but made them work twice as hard. Our group, we had a very, very, very good group. There was myself, there was Hubert Nebraska, there was Milton Gowski, there was Jack Steinberg, all children of members that belonged to that show. And our interest was to make the show grow. And if I look back, 30 years or so, about 30 years ago, if I look back, that actually Mazzikia Das, the old Peddlers show, was responsible for the building of the new shul in Alta Vista, still called Mazzikia Das. You get an awful lot of pleasure, although you get an aggravation when you go to an executive meeting now and then, but you have to overlook some of those things. We were lucky enough to, while we were still at Mazzikia Das, we were lucky enough for maybe street smart that when Rabbi Rubin didn't want to meet his second term contract, there was a little, what might I say, his demands were a little bit more than the show could afford at the time. A young man applied. We had his background, but what we were a little bit leery was that he was only about 21 years of age, just out of yeshiva. He had a little beard that sort of hid his youth, but his resume was exceptionally good. He was the son of a rabbi in New York, quite well-known rabbi, and he was helping his father with the sermons, with the prayers. He was a Joe boy in the shul in New York, and everybody, when my older brother Rudolph went down there to sort of look at the thing, he was amazed at the respect that this young man was getting from people 2 or 3 times his age. We decided to go with him, and that was the best decision that Mazzikia Das ever did, because I might say today he is regarded as the chief rabbi in the city of Ottawa. He's also renowned. Rabbi Bulka?
No, you said he, but you didn't give a name.
He is Rabbi Bulka. Rabbi Bulka is an amazing young man, and I think in the second year of our tenancy, in the old location yet, he, unknown to us, was going to Ottawa University to get his master's, and at the same time, a year later, we found out that he was still attending to get his PhD at the university. We asked him on a number of occasions, Rabbi, when have you got time to attend to the shul, go to hospitals, go to universities, raise a family? And his thing is, I know how to control my time. In other words, time is everything. And right now, that gentleman, Rabbi Bulka, has been with us in the new shul, and he's brought his shul to new heights, which we never expected it to be. Our membership today is over 500 families. We're bulging at the seams to talking now of enlarging the shul. Where to enlarge it is another question. To get the people to commit themselves to large amounts of money is also a little difficult. But I'm sure it will happen. With him leading the course, it will happen.
Okay, as young guys, where did you hang out? What restaurants? What pool hall?
In the old days, there was a pool hall right for the reader to see there.
No, go on. Right now, Dave's wife has come up, and we're going to throw in some words occasionally too.
Yeah, very,
Well,
very
but
good.
the thing is, right after Saturday night, right after the hockey game, we go into Wise and Sell a Pepsi or a snack, you know, meat and coke and whatever. And occasionally we go into Mecklenburg.
There was Mecklenburg there was Wise, and they made good sandwiches. They did make good sandwiches. Of course, in those days you couldn't afford them, too much of that stuff. But I do want to say something that has crossed my mind. And that was in our old Mazikya Das, and even in the new one for many, many years, Reverend Wiseboard. We have been most fortunate that the people we hired to be the religious section or the religious part of the shul were exceptionally capable. Like Reverend Whiteford was with us from the old shul. I'm sure he was with us for about 30 years, and the relationship was so close to each member that his name was revered forever and ever. And I remember Reverend Baker, who used to live on King Edward Street. He was for many years when we were on Murray Street. And I do want you to know, I do want you to know that Murray Street, where we were at the location, was the second Murray Street shul, because right across the street was like the old Mazikya Das. It was like and the Litwick brothers bought it from us and made a 4-unit apartment building. So we moved over on the corner, right on the corner of King Edward and Murray. Reverend Baker was so revered by all his members that when he passed away, we were shocked. Then Reverend Bornstein came in after that right away, and it was amazing how well he was in the shul as well as Reverend Whiteford. And then we were lucky with Rabbi Bulka, been with us for 30-some years. Yeah, then there was a lady in our shul, Ursula Fleet's wife. Her first name was Bertha. She took charge of the ladies' auxiliary, where there was every Sunday there was a social tea that we raised, whether it was 25 cents at midst or 50 cents. If you were $1, you were a millionaire. But that sort of kept the shul close together. It kept the women working hard, and it helped the budget as well. And then we got yeah. And then on top of that, we used to run Hanukkah parties in our show. We were the originators of the Hanukkah party, and Jack Smith at the time, we rented in our show and got to such a stage that was an overflow, and our show became way too small. So we rented the community center, the big social hall there, and we ran that for about 7-8 years until everybody got tired of working, and it sort of petered out. Now it's still continued, but it's a joint of Mazikya Das, that Shalom. We run it as one unit. In Ottawa, we were very fortunate at that time to have Jewish doctors. There was a Dr. Slover, there was a Dr. Schechter, there was a Dr. Fireman, and there was a Dr. Perlman, and the same thing with lawyers.
And Dr. Mercer.
And Dr. Mercer, yes, he was the one that diagnosed me with rheumatic fever.
Dr. Sloan?
Dr. Mirsky.
No, but I say Dr. Sloan is a
Dr.
dentist.
Sloan was a dentist, and we were fortunate to have Jewish lawyers. There was Leaf, who was the lawyer. There was Greenberg. There was I have it right here. I forgot. Soloway. There was the Mirsky boys were our lawyers. We were lucky. We had like the A.J. Freeman store. Now, A.J. Freeman is, somebody should be said about him and kept the professor because he was responsible for helping, at that time, I would say 50% of the Jewish families. Mrs. Freeman especially was so benevolent to everything that it was amazing how she could cope with it. He started the Hadassah. There worked for everybody came to him for help. There was the old stores, Murphy Gamble, there was Ogilvy. But in those days, Ogilvy, the Piper store, never accepted any Jews as workers. There was the La Roques, who was also owned by a Jewish family. And again, that was quite successful. Of course, there was
Okay, we're on tape number 2, Dave. So, section 4 says, talk about anything that you want. So, the ball's in your court.
the ball is in my court. Thank you again, Joe. Really, Ottawa was a beautiful city for the Jewish people, and as my wife corrected me, it still is a beautiful people. Charitable, one of the best. A beautiful city, the beautiful people. Ottawa is one of the best contributors to the UJA Fund, to the Israeli Bond Fund, and anything that's to help each other is very easily accomplished over here. Our board, the VAD, works close with the people and with the synagogues and the schools and everything else. We really are most fortunate in this city that we have my Ezekiel Das, in Byward is Bet Shalom, downtown and uptown. We have the Agudas Israel, there's a Reform shul, there's a real Orthodox Baptist shul, and also we're fortunate that our Chevy Kadisha has taken over, where a Jewish person is given the privilege that we really wanted to have instead of being like the olden days at goat chase. The fact is, the Chevy Kadisha chapel on Together Street is up first. It's going to be up for sale if I'm right. Oh, has been sold, I don't know.
It's been sold.
It has been sold, I know. And we have a new home now in Alta Vista on Cuba Street. Beautiful place. It's larger. The parking is a little bit difficult, but again, it's progress. Also, we were fortunate here that in the olden days we had our own plumber. He was Greenberg and Held. Our own electrician, Goldstein Brothers at that time. Alec Brothman was a carpenter. Duarte Furs was here. Sapkas the Fourier was here. So in case the language was a barrier, these people spoke well Jewish. So really, what else can I say about Ottawa? Except it's growing and growing. We're now spreading out west to Canada, even to Stittsville, people are moving.
And they're going out east.
Yeah.
So really, Joe, I think you've got it. That just about takes.
Let me just tell you something. I was in the AZA. And we used to have an advisor. Ben Appotive was our advisor. Now, you know how long ago that is, eh?
Can I interrupt you? That brother of mine was so talented that at one time he used to be the master ceremony at the Gasta Country Club in Aylmer, if you recall that.
Why did we like Beats? Because he always had jokes. He used to entertain us so much. That's what I remember.
He was good. Unfortunately, he was working with me at the SNS. I went overseas. I left my car for Edith to drive when I was overseas because it would be a help for her and my parents. And when I got to all the shot, there was about 20 letters waiting for me there. And all I read was that Ben fell down the stairs, that Ben cut himself, that Ben wrecked my car because he couldn't move his foot to it. And then we realized that he had Dr. Schechter analyzed it as the style of multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
And at that time, Ben was the first case in Ottawa that had it. First Jewish case, that is. And Dr. Schechter at that time was exceptionally good at what he was doing. Still, he's up until recently.
Yeah, great diagnostician.
Yeah, he was good, and he kept a close watch on Jeffy, but Jeffy, Ben. There was nothing, unfortunately, that could be done because it was the early stage. Nobody knew about diets or anything like that. But he did get married. It came into the relapse, so it was quiet for about 10 years, and then it came back very, very badly. He left there was a wife left, Sally, and his son Warren, on his own, accomplished a lot of this, and still is accomplishing. He works for Citibank out of Toronto, and he got to be the top man. He was advisor to finance matters to the right, the Toronto, the Reichmans, and he was their top man in the field of credit and finance. And then he started on his own as a manager for people who invest money in new businesses. I don't know the exact title it would be, but from what I understand now, he's got 4 or 5 people working for him, and he's doing quite well. So in all, Ottawa, Canada as well, has been exceptionally good. Pretty proud of family. We thank God for that.
It's been good for most people.
Yes, that's right. Anyone who wanted to work.
I
gotta say one more thing. Joe. I got. And that is, now we can be smart out of here. We can go to the bank. We can get a loan if need be. In the olden days, for a Jewish person to get a bank loan was next to impossible. So we had what is called an oxy.
Oxy, sure.
An oxy was a number of people got together and gave $100 or $50 or whatever they could to start a fund that would help the more unfortunate Jewish families. Now that actually lasted for many, many years, and
met on Sundays.
On Sundays at the Cheder, which was located on George Street. It's now the Salvation Army or something, or rather. And Isaac Greener was the first president of that thing, and Zalman Silver took over and did a magnificent job. I was hired as a bookkeeper because that was my profession originally. So every Sunday when people were playing ball or something, I had to be at the Oxy and mark down the collections and the checks. And believe me, when we had to give out $100 check, it was a hard debate as to does he deserve it? Will he pay back $4 a week, or will he not pay back? If he's risky, will we get a signature from somebody else? But the best part of it was that it wasn't a Sunday that went by that we didn't have salami and sliced bread on the plate, that we didn't have a bottle of Johnny
VO.
VO or maybe club, a few soft drinks. It was failure. It was good, and it was needed at the time because many a person today still remark that we should have something. But there is a free loan society.
Not the same thing, though.
It's not the same thing, but it does help. So.
No, the Oxy was like a private club, wasn't it?
And the new member had to be voted in.
Yeah, it was like a private club.
Oh yes.
Now you were there. I know my father was a member of an Oxy.
That's right. So
are you talking about the same Oxy?
Yes, on the Cheder, on the upstairs of the sewer, of the Cheder.
Yeah, the Genscher was in there.
Genscher was there.
And Zelikovic.
Zelikovic was
there. Yeah, so
there.
we're talking about the same Oxy.
But we were fortunate that some devoted people, because that needed time, and they had a sign at the bank for about $10,000.
Cohn from the furniture was a member? I'm almost positive.
No.
No?
It was the Peddlers Oxy, really.
Yeah.
It was the Peddlers Oxy. But it was needed stories. It really, when you look back, like the other... Sure. Like when I look back at the years that we put in at the SNF Auto Parts, or the years that we put in at Somerset Lunch, and 5 cents and 10 cents meant a lot. Whereas the 10 cents in those days meant like meant like $10 today. Going back to Somerset Lunch, in those days, the light lunch that I had was located in Sandy Hill on Somerset and Russell, and right near us, within 2 minutes walk, there was the playgrounds, the Sandy Hill playground, and there was the Ottawa University. Well, our business was mainly in the evening because of the ice rink or the baseball games. Lunches was very good because Ottawa University students used to come down, buy the hamburger, which was 25 cents in those days. Chips was possibly 10 or 15 cents if they wanted a big bag of it. And the fun part of it was there was one gentleman, student, at the Ottawa University, who came in and day out, and all he would have was just a hamburger, either a milkshake or a glass of milk with it. Well, many, many years later, I had joined the Imperial Life Insurance Company, and Edith and I were invited to a convention in Lake Placid. And we were on the dance floor, and this gentleman came up. I looked at him. He had a name tag on, but I didn't pay any attention to it. He looked like he could use $1 to buy a pair of new shoes and maybe get his clothes pressed, but I didn't say anything about it. Stupid lie, maybe. Maybe, I said. We tried to talk, but he didn't say anything. And then about 5 minutes later, he tapped me on the shoulder again. He said, "You don't recognize me, do you?" I said, "I honestly don't. Where are you from?" He said, "I used to eat in your lunchroom a hamburger and a glass of milk. Paul Dashin is my name." This Power Corporation. What's his name? Desjardins. No. Desjardins is for Paul Demer. Paul Demerat was his name. He said, "I'm Paul Demerat." Holy mackerel, he hugged me and we kissed each other. The wives got introduced to each other, and then he went in his own way, and I shook my head. I said, "Oh my God, look what happened." The story was, he was at the university, didn't finish his last year. His father had, he was going in for a doctor, and his father had a bus line in Sudbury that went bankrupt. The boy left the university to go and help his father in the bankruptcy. Today he's about one of Canada's richest men, Paul Demerat, who owns Power Corporation with his sons and everything else. But the funny part of it was, after Paul Demerat left me on the dance floor, all the other old-timers, Kelly Schwartz, Sammy Weber, all the old-timers from Imperial Life came running to me. "Who the hell are you?" Excuse my expression. "Who the hell are you that can take the president of Imperial Life and talk to him for 10 minutes on the floor as if you're buddy friends?" And it says, we were buddy friends at one time. And it was just a coincidence that happened in a lifetime. So that's it. Now I can say hello, Joe, and goodbye, Joe.